Like and subscribe. Beyond Antarctica. Chapter 11. As Kim entered the bridge, Bob greeted her with an appreciative smile. "That smells fantastic," he remarked as she handed him a steaming cup of coffee and a plate heaped with food. "Have you seen anyone around this morning?" Kim asked. "No one came to the mess hall, not a single person, and my father is not in his quarters either." Bob took a hearty sip of his coffee and looked pleased. "This hits the spot, thank you." He then gestured towards the window. "You haven't seen them because they're all down there." Kim picked up the binoculars from the table and looked where Bob was pointing. She saw the crew on the beach, set against a backdrop of massive cliff faces reminiscent of the white cliffs of Dover. "Is that England?" she asked. Bob chuckled. "If only it were that simple. It does bear a striking resemblance, though. Look down the beach. They're setting up a base camp near the ship." "Why a base camp?" As she scanned the horizon, her eyes locked onto something shimmering, half buried in the sand and protruding into the water. "What is that?" she mumbled. Bob finished his bite of food before responding. "I noticed that around 3 a.m. last night and informed John. It looks like a shipwreck, half buried under what appears to be a massive mudslide. The dinghy is gearing up to go again. I think that's Todd taking more equipment to the site," Bob added. Kim's interest deepened. "Gear? What kind of gear are we talking about?" Bob explained. "John believes that whatever is buried there could be crucial to our understanding of this area. It might even connect with the underwater city we've been exploring." Kim set the binoculars down with a clatter. "Half of them should be in sick bay," she muttered as she stormed off the bridge. Spotting Todd busy loading more rope onto the dinghy, she called out, "Hey, Todd!" Todd looked up, a weary expression crossing his face. "Kim, please, not this again," he pleaded. Carrying her medical bag, Kim was resolute. "I'm coming with you to change Tony's bandages and check on his wounds and make sure my dad is fine. He really should rest. I don't have a clue how he's even walking around. It has to be excruciating to even breathe." As she climbed onto the dinghy and noticed the climbing gear, her curiosity piqued. "What do you need with climbing gear?" she inquired, looking around the dinghy. "If you're going, I guess you'll find out," Todd replied, avoiding her gaze. "I'm not going," Kim stated firmly, setting her bag down. "But my job on this ship is to make sure everyone is healthy enough for the day, or they sit it out. I'm making sure everyone who avoided me this morning is okay for the day." Todd looked at her skeptically. "You're not planning on telling your father he has to sit this out, are you? You know that won't go over well." Kim sighed. "Yeah, well, I made a promise to Mom. If he's okay, I'll say nothing," Todd replied. "But you know he's not okay, and you know he won't return." So once again, "Kim, please, not today," Todd implored, hoping to avoid any confrontations. After they arrived on the beach, Kim walked into a tent set up on the sand. Her father looked up from a makeshift table. "Kim, what are you doing off the ship? I thought we had an understanding," John remarked. "We do," Kim replied firmly, setting her medical bag down. "I'm here to do my job. I'm not just the cook, Dad. Everyone's health is my responsibility. I'm here to make sure everyone is fit for the day or they need to head back to the ship." John looked up. "Everyone is fine, Kim. I've checked them myself." "Did you change Tony's bandages? Did you check Bix and Todd's leg wounds to make sure they're not seeping or infected?" Kim pressed, her tone insistent. John sighed, lowering his head in admission. "You're right. Do your thing, honey." Kim continued, "Lift your shirt, Dad. I need to check you first." A rare laugh sounded out from John as he replied, "Yeah, love, that's not going to happen. I suggest you don't push your luck and go find Tony. So, do you think we can find a way into that ship? Or will we need to cut through?" he asked Todd, trying to steer the discussion away from his health. Tony chimed in from across the tent. "There seems to be a hatch on top, but it's half buried in mud. With this extra rope, we should be able to get 2 men up there and have it cleared in about an hour or so at most, sir." "Do you even know what it is?" Kim asked. "It seems to be a massive ship caught in a large mudslide from the cliffs and now stuck in time," Bick answered. "Change Tony's bandages and check on everyone. Then, I want you to stay at base camp in case anyone gets injured today," John instructed, his tone softening. "I'm not here to impose, Dad. Really, I just want to make sure Tony is okay. He'll work because you asked him to, and you know that. Kim retorted, her concern evident. John nodded. If you say they can't go, I'll order them back to the ship. I'm staying on the beach, hence the nice tent, love. I'm in no shape to climb. You can keep an old man company when you're done. Kim finished her rounds, ensuring everyone was fit for the day's tasks, though she couldn't bring herself to sideline anyone despite their injuries. She then joined her father in the tent, where he had set up a chessboard on the table, a chair opposite him, empty and inviting. "Hey, love, care to entertain an old man? I think I can take you," John challenged with a wink. A broad smile spread across Kim's face. "Aw, do you now?" she replied playfully, settling into the chair, starting to set up her pieces. Meanwhile, from their new vantage point, at the top of the vessel they could see over the cliff face to what appeared to be the remnants of a city skyline. Only the roofs and some buildings' upper sections were visible, sticking out of a tangled mess of mud. Tony, peering out towards the distant ruins, changed their plan on the spot. "I'm shifting our focus over there, about 100 yards or more. We need to climb over to the cliffs and cross over to that building," he directed, pointing out a partially toppled structure. Bick, looking over the scene, was struck by the scale of devastation. "Wow, it looks like it rained so much that the ground itself turned to quicksand, swallowing up this half of the city. What the ocean didn't claim, the mud and earth did." As they approached the breach in the toppled building, Todd ignited a torch and tossed it inside, revealing a 40-foot drop. The interior was a blend of ancient and futuristic elements. As they descended further into the ruins, the walls began to flicker to life, as if sensing their presence as it gradually illuminated their path. "It's strange how empty it is," Tony remarked, his voice echoing slightly off the bare walls. "Nothing but empty rooms." Todd nodded, scanning the surroundings. "They were probably still stripping it clean when the ship got caught by a mudslide, that's my guess. So maybe there's something still of interest to find if they didn't finish this section of the city." "Yeah, let's hope so," Bick agreed as they moved deeper into the shadowy, glowing labyrinth of the ancient ruins. As they ventured deeper into the building, Bick cautioned, "Careful, you can see where the building was sheared off just ahead." Todd nodded to Tony. "Go ahead and check that out." Tony peered into the darkness. "It's a drop, sir, and what looks like a circling rampway," he reported, securing their ropes for descent. After safely making their way down, they found themselves in another section of the building. "It looks like they preferred ramps inside their buildings instead of stairs, but I noticed a lot of stairs outside their buildings," Bick mused, finding the architectural choice peculiar. "Should we go farther or go back? John won't be happy that we're not where we're supposed to be. If something were to happen, we'd be stranded on our own without anyone knowing where to find us," Todd reasoned. "Okay, Bick, you go back. Let John know the game plan and place a marker of some kind outside this building as you leave," Todd suggested, outlining a cautious approach. "We'll try to leave a crumb trail from here on out, just for safety." Bick agreed, unhooking from their line. "I'll see you guys back at base camp in a few hours then. Don't be heroes. We can always come back. Todd says, now that I've trimmed all the fat, we should be able to move at a reasonable speed." Tony, with a smirk, replies, "What? Bick's not fat, just slow, huh?" Tony chuckles. "Yeah, I get it now. I'd like to get this done today. Do you mind if I just go ahead and let you catch up?" Todd says, "Do your thing. I'll catch up. Be careful, though, and leave me breadcrumbs if needed." Tony agrees and takes off at a brisk pace. 10 minutes later, Todd reaches what appears to be the base floor of the building, a grand entrance, the room and building perfectly preserved by the mud, yet eerily empty. Suddenly, he hears a faint shout. "Todd! Todd!" He turns, spotting a large hallway in the corner of the room from where the sound seems to emanate. "Tony, are you okay?" Todd starts running toward the sound. Just then, Tony pops around the corner. "Yeah, I'm fine." Todd asks, "If you're okay, then you must have found something." Tony nods. "Yeah, but you wouldn't believe it if I just told you. You have to see this." He leads Todd down the corridor, which opens up into a massive room. "Wow," Todd gasps, taking in the grand scale of the room. Tony points his flashlight toward a perfectly chromed sphere, 100 feet in diameter, hovering a foot off the ground. As Todd approaches, he kneels down and asks, "Tony, what's keeping this in the air?" Tony, shining his flashlight upward into the void, replies, "That's why I called you. This thing is floating. Look up there. It seems to be large doors. I think this is a hangar." "A hangar?" Todd muses, intrigued by the possibility. "I just bet, yeah. Follow me back to where we entered the room. There was something on the wall." They walk back a few hundred feet to the spot Tony mentioned. "Look how this section of the wall lights up differently," Tony observes, placing his hand on it. The wall projects a purplish color, highlighted in red. "Wow, it reacted to my touch," Tony says, amazed. Seeing what Tony had done, Todd places his hand on that section of the wall and slowly drags it from one end to the other, eliciting further reactions from the technology embedded within. As the room vibrated, a loud, echoing sound filled the air, accompanied by a gentle trembling underfoot. The walls, illuminated from within, shimmered as dust cascaded down, creating a glittering sandstorm effect, enchanting and surreal. Todd and Tony looked up, awestruck, as the source of the noise revealed itself, giant doors ascending to reveal the sky above. Just as they processed this sight, a humming sound, increasing in volume, drew their attention back to the chrome sphere. In a breathtaking display, it shot out into the open air, hovered momentarily as if to assert its freedom, then darted off at an incredible speed, vanishing from sight. "Wow, did you see that?" Tony exclaimed. Todd, still trying to comprehend what had just happened, replied, "It was so fast I almost didn't catch it. The acceleration, it's like nothing I've ever seen." Realizing the significance of their discovery, Tony nodded. "We need to go back and report what we've found before we explore further." Todd says, "Yeah, we should have brought Kim's phone to record our findings. We can come back," he suggested, leading the way back to base camp. Meanwhile, at the base camp, an ominous hum approached. John, engrossed in a game of chess, dismissed the noise until Kim stood abruptly. She quickly steps outside the tent. "Dad, get over here," she called out, clutching her phone. Slightly irritated at the interruption, suspecting it was just a ploy to save her from a losing game, John followed, jesting about her tactics. "You might lose your first game to me, and you run off like a little girl." However, his light-hearted tone vanished as he stepped out and saw a large chrome sphere circling the camp, then began to rise slowly. Instinctively, John pulled Kim behind him, a protective gesture, as the sphere abruptly stopped its ascent. For a moment, it seemed to acknowledge their presence, hanging silently in the air above them. Then, without warning, it shot upward and disappeared from sight. As Bick and Kim discussed the fleeting glimpse of the silver sphere, John's attention was sharply redirected by the sight of Todd and Tony making their way back to camp. They quickly closed the distance. Todd, dropping his backpack in the sand, eagerly grabbed his water bottle and gulped down several long swigs before catching his breath. Tony didn't waste a moment, launching into a detailed account of their exploration. "The underground chamber we found is unlike anything we've seen so far," Tony began, excitement clear in his voice, "and the technology, if we can get it out, could be revolutionary." John, absorbing every word, quickly briefed them on their own encounter with the silver sphere, and says, "We need to mount a full expedition into that buried ship." His next orders were decisive. "I want that ship opened up today. Grab torches and whatever else you need. There's technology in there. I can feel it." Todd and Tony nodded, already mentally preparing for the task. John turned to Bick, who looked skeptical. "Bick says I do not think that's a ship." "John, it's more than likely just a building that toppled over." "It's a ship, Bick," John asserted firmly, a hint of impatience in his tone. "And not just any ship, a treasure trove of whatever advanced tech they were trying to save." Bick, though still doubtful, could not argue with John's conviction. He nodded slowly, adding, "If that's just a small percent of it visible, the total ship size must be colossal." "Exactly," John said. "Let's get to it. Boys, get your gear and start cutting. We don't have time to waste." After hours of attempting every method they could think of, they had to admit defeat. None of the equipment they had on board the Celeb Mariner could make even a scratch on the hull of the ship. The material was unlike anything they had encountered before. It was incredibly resistant, almost as if it were designed to withstand time itself. John, growing impatient, joined them at the site to assess the situation himself. Wasn't there a hatch or some kind of access point you mentioned? He asked. Yeah, it's more of a doorway, really, Todd replied, wiping sweat from his brow. But it's sealed shut, and it's huge, about 30 feet tall. The round object in the center seems like it could be a knob or handle, about 10 feet off the ground. We tried everything to turn it, even used winches, but it won't budge. Tony chimed in. The mud in front of it piles right up to the knob, making it accessible at least. It's covered in hieroglyphs, and it definitely looks like it's meant to open, but how? It's like nothing we've dealt with before. John stepped closer, inspecting the enigmatic door. The hieroglyphs were intricate, suggesting a complex mechanism or a lock of some sort that they hadn't figured out how to operate. This isn't just brute force, it's about understanding the technology, John mused aloud. We need to take a different approach, John decided, turning back to face his team. Let's document these hieroglyphs in detail. Maybe there's a clue here we're missing. John says, go get Kim. Tony chuckled, misunderstanding at first, but then John added, no, really, I want you to go get Kim. Complying, Tony hurried down the ropes to fetch her. As they hoisted Kim up to the top of the structure, John urged her, I want you to take a look at that and tell me what you think before anyone feeds you any ideas of their own. Kim observed. It's a door of some kind, granted, a large one, but a door nonetheless. She studied the symbols more closely. These are the same symbols that were on the staff. They're not really hieroglyphs. They're more of a form of writing, making it hard to really translate without anything to go off of, Dad. I'm only guessing, I remind you. John nodded, instructing everyone. Just the same, I remind you all, keep quiet, no helping her. I want your brain fresh, love. Go look. With the mud cleared and a makeshift scaffolding in place, Kim was helped to the top by Tony and left to ponder the writing on the knob. Minutes went by. She started frantically shifting through her phone, mumbling, no, it couldn't be that easy. She remembered the staff held by the underwater statue, then said, the ground, recalling what the native chieftain had done, then added, the sky. She placed her hand below the knob and declared, to the ground we go. Pushing her other hand below the knob, it lit up green. She twisted the knob and pointed to the sky, and to free the heavens above once again for all life, she said. Removing her hand, it lit up white, leaving her handprint. Once again, she twisted the knob, and a thunderous crack sounded out as the door cracked open. She pointed to the ground and placed her hand below the knob once more, reading the last transcription. The crew stood in awe as the door swung open. John praised her. Nice job, Kim. I knew you could read that. Kim replied, I didn't really read it. The last set of symbols are reference points, not symbols to the original story. I used my own words to give me semblance. It was the actions on the door that opened it. Hand below knob, then above, then below, or vice versa. Here, explaining her reasoning to the crew, Kim stopped short of finishing. Realizing no one was really following, being helped down off the scaffolding, they looked into the unknown void, curious and eager to explore what lay beyond. This is not goodbye, nor the end. Until the story continues, my friends. B.N.Rocker.